For the first time in history, a cardinal stands accused before a Vatican court in what's being called the mother of all trials. Join us with the news from the Eternal City, Church Militant Rome correspondent, Dr. Jules Gomes. Jules, who is this cardinal and what's he being charged with?
Brad, on Wednesday, the Vatican's chief prosecutor, Alessandro S.T.B, told the judge that Cardinal Giovanni Angelo Becciu, a very high-ranking cardinal, should be sent to prison for 7 years and 3 months and should be fined over 10,000 euros and have $15 million worth of Vatican assets confiscated from him for his role in mismanaging Holy See funds. We are using the word mismanaging, but Becciu has been accused of embezzlement, fraud, and the abuse of office.
Now, this is being dubbed, Jules, as the mother of all trials. Could you dial that in for our audience?
Well, here it almost seems like the mother of all circuses, because everything seems to be on a merry-go-round, and it's turning into a clown show half the time. But this is historic, Brad, all said and done, and we don't know if anything is really going to materialize, if those in the dock are going to be sentenced to prison. There are 10 defendants, and Alessandro S.T.B has asked for a collective prison term of 73 years for the whole lot. But we don't know what's going to happen. We've got to wait and see, because the court is now in recess and they will return in September, late September, and the verdicts will be handed out in December.
How much money are we talking about in this trial? And just give us a brief overcap of what took place.
Well, we're talking about a lot of money, and that is why, again, this is, the mother of all trials, because the Vatican, you remember, invested about 400 million in this London's prestigious upmarket Sloane Avenue property that was going to be turned into luxury flats for the super rich. And the Vatican lost over 200 million. The business just, failed completely. The deal failed completely. A lot of people pocketed sums of money, allegedly, but then the money, that is collected by God's people from all over the world, that was lost to the tune of over 200 million.
So we're talking somewhere closer to $500 million tied up in all this, and it's going all the way up to the Vatican. Talk to us about Diddy's role as the promoter of justice in this.
He's the top dog here, Brad. He's the judge and the jury in one sense, or the prosecutor and the jury. So when he says you're guilty, that's it. Obviously, the tribunal will have to rule finally. But if they do rule against Becciu, his only option is to appeal to the Supreme Pontiff.
So what is Becciu's chances of making that appeal to the Pope? They were friends for many years.
His words are quite sad, because when Francis sacked him from, he was prefect of the Congregation for the Causes of the Saints. He had a number of important roles. Remember, he was the sostituto, that is the second in command in the Vatican Secretariat of State. And Pope Francis unceremoniously just sacked him one day, and he was shocked, and he told a private press conference, he said, until 6 o'clock, everything was fine. Pope Francis had my back. We were friends. I was the favorite guy. In fact, he was one of Pope Francis's blue-eyed boys. And all of a sudden, he was out, cast into outer darkness, and Pope Francis refused to say anything in his favor. It almost seemed like he had been thrown under the bus by Francis.
So this is the first time now, you're saying, in church history ever that a cardinal has been in such a predicament?
Absolutely, because no cardinal ever has to trial for criminal charges in a Vatican court of law. In fact, you're wondering if these guys get charged. The prison cells, I think there are a couple of tiny prison cells. Will they be enough to house all these defendants, or will the Vatican have to ask Italy? Some are even jokingly suggesting that the Vatican should requisition Castel Sant'Angelo for this purpose.
So does Becciu maintain he's innocent?
Well, absolutely. He has consistently said that he is innocent. And people I speak to on the ground say, well, he may be right because there is an Italian way of doing things. Everything in Italy is not done precisely by the book. But at the same time, it need not be illegal. And there's a very fine line drawn. It depends on which way you want to swing it. And Becciu has repeatedly insisted, for example, he said he did not, channel funds to his two brothers to support, one brother is working for Caritas, I think, to support their businesses. And he totally denies all charges against him.
Now, he's also talking about a Archbishop Edgar Penapera, who's we've reported on our site is quite a shady guy, and saying that he's the guy that was in charge after Becciu left at the Secretary of State in 2018. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, absolutely. I think at one point he even said that Francis personally gave the nod to this deal. Now, with Edgar Penapera, the big scandal is how he unapologetically and almost shamelessly admitted in court in 2019 that he had ordered the head of the Director General of the Vatican Bank to be put under surveillance because electronic surveillance, which was illegal, unauthorized, he had no authority to do it. Penapera had no authority to do it. He did not have a warrant to do it, but he got the Vatican Gendarmerie to do it. And the big question is, he says he did it because the head of the Vatican Bank wouldn't give him a loan for 150 million euros. And Para says that he suspected the head of the Vatican Bank was in league with a financier by the name of Gianluigi Torsi. So it all gets very murky, Brad.
So why is Diddy, another twist to this, why is Diddy claiming the money as Becciu attested, and he even was being attested by Diddy himself or being held up in court? Why did the prosecutor, Diddy, say the money did not come from Peter's Pence, the Pope's charitable arm, and the money didn't come from there for the London deal? But then in the proceedings just recently, Diddy did an about-face all of a sudden and said, oh, no, the money didn't come from there. Can you talk to us about that?
Well, that is an interesting and very mysterious twist in this tale. We simply don't know why he made this concession, and perhaps we can call it a concession. There is speculation that he did this perhaps to redeem the image of Peter's Pence, because we know that Catholics all over the world simply stopped giving to Peter's Pence, and Peter's Pence took a nosedive in terms of its income after the London Sloane Avenue scandal.
Yeah, and even in 2019, Pope Francis himself was asked directly about the funds coming from Peter Pence and being used in the failed London deal, and he didn't deny it. He just was on record of saying that defended that transaction, claiming it was quote good administration at the time, and that was all about the Peter Pence being used for that. So, and that caused quite a stir. And then all of a sudden now we're Diddy's just this week saying, oh no, the money didn't come from Peter Pence. It really is bizarre.
Well, everything is bizarre about this. I was talking to a very senior Vatican reporter for one of the world's most prestigious media, and he was shaking his head and saying, I just don't know what to make of it. But what he then said is that at the end of the day, there are no victims. And this almost seems like a kangaroo court because you see a crime committed by a priest, a personal friend of Pope Francis, who abused 25 nuns. There are more than 25 victims there. We're talking about Father Marco Ivan Rupnik. He gets away without a totally scot-free, in fact, with no punishment whatsoever. And people like Angelo Becciu are put in the dock and may face 7 or more years in prison.
So this brings us to a question. Let me ask you, Jules, in the court of Jules, is Becciu the innocent fall guy, or is he guilty of sin?
Well, again, it's very difficult to say that, but one thing does put up a huge red flag for me. And that is the claims that Pope Francis ordered a number of laws to be changed while this trial was going on. And insiders said that these laws were clearly changed so that things become much more difficult for Becciu, and he clearly ends up in the dock. Now, the other aspect, of course, is that we've seen Pope Francis has a magic circle around him, and every once in a while, somebody gets thrown under the bus and is the fall guy, and Francis then, happily, with his head held high, marches on and tells the world's media that he has actually done something to bring about justice. So in this whole, as I said, it's almost like, the trial conducted by Pontius Pilate, with the crowd baying, crucify him, and then Pilate washing his hands off. And because of the secrecy behind so much of the Vatican's finances, as independent journalists, we simply don't have access to the primary evidence, and we don't have the ability to evaluate things for ourselves. But we just wait and watch.
Well, speaking to our viewers, Cardinal Becciu could use your prayers. To the degree he's guilty, he could use your prayers that he convert and do penance for his crimes. But to the degree he's just the fall guy in all of this, in this failed money scheme involving many, many players, he could use your prayers a whole lot more. Jules, thank you so much for helping to break down this story for us.
Thank you, Brad.